I've been sitting in the reading room at the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission for 4 hours, going through agricultural field reports, and I need to tell you what I found. What I found in a Lancaster County agricultural record from 2010 changes everything you think you know about home cooling. 56 degrees. That was the number. Not a slogan, not a sales pitch, not a simulation. A measured water temperature inside a spring house system that kept food, milk, and workspace cool without a compressor, refrigerant, or electric fan. I kept staring at that number. 56 degrees. In summer, in humidity, in a region that now treats comfort like a machine you rent forever. Then more records started lining up. Spring houses, root cellars, banked stone walls, shaded intakes, moving air, drying air, steady soil temperature. The same physical logic kept resurfacing in different forms, then vanishing once cooling became a bill. The number stayed in my head because it should have sounded impossible. You were trained to think cooling begins with a thermostat. You were trained to think comfort arrives only after a compressor starts. You were trained to think summer air must be beaten into submission by copper coils and monthly payments. The documents say something colder. The archive made the pattern harder to ignore. Every older solution attacked the heat before it entered the living space. Thick walls slowed it. Shade blocked it. Dry air accepted it. Ground temperature absorbed it. Modern systems usually wait until the heat is already inside, then charge you to drag it back out. That is a business model, not a law of nature. They say the first part of cooling is not cold. It is dryness. It is shade. It is slower heat gain. It is air that arrives from the ground instead of the roof. It is a house that stops swallowing wet heat every minute of the day. That is where the $6 salt comes in. Not as magic, not as a gimmick, as a desiccant. As a cheap mineral that pulls water out of incoming air so the house can use older physics more effectively. I found that pattern in field guides. I found it in agricultural records. I found it in engineering history. I found it in places the modern building industry never bothers to send you. Not because it failed, because compressors, refrigerants, replacement parts, and service calls pay better. Here's what the evidence shows. And here's why nobody was supposed to find it. You were sold a story. The story says summer comfort starts with a sealed box outside your house and a second box inside it. The evidence says a $6 bag of calcium chloride paired with buried pipe, shade, and stable earth temperature can cut the strain so sharply that a house stops fighting summer and starts using it. And yes, this works even if your house was built 50 years ago, you live in a city, you've never done this before, and you don't have land. Stay with me, because what I found in Lancaster County uses the same physics the Persians used to tame desert heat more than 2,000 years ago. You need the science first. Salt does not manufacture cold. It removes water from air. Calcium chloride is hygroscopic. That means water vapor bonds to it readily, so the incoming air becomes drier before it reaches the space you live in. That matters more than you were told. Humid air is heavy with hidden heat. Engineers call it latent heat. When you lower humidity, evaporation starts working again, your walls stop holding as much moisture, and air moving through shaded or earth-tempered passages can drop effective temperature much faster. The United States Department of Energy says non-vapor compression cooling technologies could reduce cooling energy use by 50%. The same department summarizes research on coefficients of performance approaching 10 for advanced non-vapor systems. Put that beside many conventional residential air conditioning systems, which often operate around a coefficient of performance between 2.8 and 3.5. That means up to 10 units of cooling for every 1 unit of input versus roughly 3. That is the whole scandal. There is another number you should keep in your mind, 48%. The Department of Energy cites Energy Information Administration data showing that cooling and heating account for 48% of energy use in American homes. Nearly half. That means even a partial reduction matters. If you cut only the wettest, hardest afternoon load, you are not chasing a tiny gain. You are cutting into the biggest line on the household energy ledger. This is why humidity matters so much. A conventional system spends enormous effort pulling moisture out after that moisture is already inside. The older method attacks the problem at the border. Dry the intake first. Cool the path second. Exhaust the hottest indoor air high and late. Once you understand that sequence, the entire industry pitch starts to sound backward. Think about sweat on your skin. Your body does not create cold. It loses heat when moisture leaves your skin into air that can still accept it. If the air is saturated, sweat lingers and you suffer. If the air is drier, the same body feels relief. This setup behaves the same way. The salt clears humidity first. The buried pipe borrows 54 to 56 degree soil. The shaded intake prevents new heat gain. The stack vent keeps air moving. It is simple physics. A car radiator helps you understand it too. You are not creating coolness from nowhere. You are moving heat somewhere easier for it to go. The ground accepts heat. Night air releases heat. Dry air accepts evaporation. Your house becomes a heat manager instead of a heat trap. The gap between those systems is money. Huge money. That gap represents equipment sales, refrigerant sales, installation contracts, maintenance visits, and replacement cycles worth tens of billions every year. And that is why you have never heard of this. I felt the proof in my body before I saw it on paper. I was in Strasbourg, in Lancaster County, on a July afternoon when the road shimmered and the gravel snapped under my boots. The barns radiated heat. The fields looked bleached. Then I stepped beside a spring house and the air changed on my face. It felt immediate. No condenser screamed, no fan cycled, no vent roared. I heard water, insects, and one loose board tapping in the shade. The coolness did not rush at me. It sat there, steady, quiet, dense, like the building had decided summer was not welcome. Eli saw the look on my face and laughed. He told me his grandfather never used the word cooling. He used the phrase paying attention. Then he pointed at the stone, the shade, the water path, and the venting order like he was naming members of a family. That stuck with me. I also walked into a cellar room nearby that held the same lesson in another form. The smell changed first. Damp earth, wood, apple skins, no mechanical note at all. The room was not icy. It was stable. That is the missing word in almost every modern sales pitch. Stable beats dramatic. A house does not need to feel like a hotel lobby. It needs to stop swinging from soaked heat to artificial chill. Eli told me his people had used some version of the same logic for 4 generations. Stone first, shade first, moisture control first, then airflow. He said that habit came with them through Pennsylvania German farm country from Canton Burn and the Palatinate, where cellars, masonry, and seasonal room use were already part of daily life. Nobody told you, not your builder, not your contractor, not the man who sold you a bigger unit. That knowledge never disappeared. It was written out of the manual. It was waiting. The Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission's Lancaster Plain Agricultural Context Report, published in 2010, states that spring houses supported home dairying and played an essential role in preserving food. The National Park Service also records 56-degree spring water at Hopewell Furnace's spring house and describes the room used to store milk, meat, fruits, and vegetables. The paper trail is there, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Long before your house became a machine host, other people solved the same heat problem with the same physics. In ancient Persia, builders in Yazd used tall wind catchers above living spaces and paired them with subterranean qanat paths, so moving air crossed cool underground channels before entering the rooms people actually occupied. Air first. Earth second. In the American Southwest, builders used mass instead of height. A United States Department of Housing and Urban Development guide on Southwest housing traditions modeled 16-inch adobe walls and found peak interior temperatures staying 4 to 6 degrees below outside heat. That is the same lesson in another dialect. Slow the heat, buffer the swing, make the structure work before the machinery starts. The Persians did not read this in a textbook. They figured it out the way all real knowledge gets discovered, by paying attention to what the earth was already doing. Pueblo builders did the same. Every civilization that mastered extreme heat arrived at the same answer independently. The Amish never forgot. They carried it from Canton Burn and the Palatinate to Pennsylvania nearly 290 years ago and kept building it because it worked and because they never needed anyone's permission to do what made sense. The modern burial has a date, 1930. That was the year General Motors and DuPont formed Kinetic Chemicals to produce Freon. Safe mechanical refrigeration was becoming commercially scalable, and a future market was opening in every house that could be taught to fear summer. What did the older alternative threaten? Not a laboratory, a revenue river, a market that now measures $49.10 billion in North America alone. Then the mechanism hardened. For decades, comfort standards and post-war housing practice trained builders toward sealed, mechanically cooled space. The Center for the Built Environment at the University of California, Berkeley, explains that before the adaptive comfort model entered ASHRAE Standard 55 in 2004, naturally ventilated buildings struggled to comply with a narrow comfort range based on controlled laboratory settings. When your rulebook assumes a sealed room, your drawings start serving the machine. That is how older knowledge gets pushed aside without anyone needing to burn the books. It gets worse. The sales machine recruited culture. House Beautiful editor Joseph Howland was already writing in 1954 about air conditioning as a built-in feature of suburban housing. Then, Carrier locked in scale. In January 1956, Carrier announced its huge Levittown deal for 702 Pennsylvania homes. The company sold cooling equipment. DuPont and General Motors held the refrigerant chain. Shelter magazines sold the dream of modern comfort. Mortgage-backed suburbia sold the floor plan that needed it. They all benefited. Look at what happened to the houses themselves. Once cooling became assumed, roofs dropped, porches shrank, operable shutters disappeared, and whole neighborhoods were drawn as if summer sun no longer mattered. ASHRAE's own history notes that air conditioning changed homes, bringing lower roofs, larger windows, and the elimination of verandas and other sun-shielding features. First, the machine was added. Then the house forgot how to help itself. Then the owners forgot the house ever knew. Media sold aspiration. Regulation normalized sealed comfort. Industry collected the checks. The financial links were direct. Carrier needed houses designed around cooling. Refrigerant makers needed installed systems. Publishers needed advertising pages. Suburban builders needed a premium feature that justified the next payment plan. An entire field of knowledge disappeared from architecture schools, building codes, and engineering habits. Not because it failed, because it wasn't profitable. And it never really stopped. The Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute says openly that it works lawmakers and regulators on energy efficiency, tax incentives, decarbonization, chemicals, and rulemaking. Open Secrets reported that the same trade group spent $964,622 on federal lobbying in 2022. You do not spend that kind of money to protect ideas that make equipment unnecessary. You spend it to protect markets, standards, incentives, and the default assumption that comfort must be bought as a machine. That is the continuation. The North America HVAC market was valued at $49.10 billion in 2024. Every alternative installed is a unit of that market that never gets sold, refilled, replaced, or renewed. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people with land, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need to buy equipment. You need a yard, a drill, a weekend. Here is the blueprint I would build first. I would start on the north or east side of your house, where summer shade lasts longest, and trench one run 42 inches deep and 68 feet long with a steady 2% slope away from the house. Into that trench I would lay 4-inch corrugated HDPE drain pipe, not thin dryer duct, because you need strength, drainage, and soil contact that lasts. Build the intake carefully. At the intake end, set a 24-inch by 24-inch by 24-inch box under full shade. Line the lid with low-E radiant foil. Fit 2 stainless insect screens. Then hang a perforated tray holding 6 to 8 pounds of calcium chloride pellets above a washable muslin cotton pre-filter. Humid air enters there first. The salt strips moisture. The pipe borrows the Earth's temperature. The house receives calmer air. Keep every transition tight. At the wall, sleeve the line through the rim joist with 4-inch Schedule 40 PVC. Add a cleanout tee. Add a condensate leg draining into washed gravel. Then place one black-painted 6-inch PVC exhaust stack on the warm side of the house, rising 12 feet above the intake level, so afternoon sun strengthens stack effect and keeps air moving without a motor. That part matters most. A slope of 2% is not optional. A flat pipe causes standing condensation and mold. For costs, you are looking at $118 to $164 for the HDPE pipe. You are looking at $31 to $47 for the PVC fittings. The calcium chloride runs $7 to $14. Foil and screens run $18 to $29. Gravel, sealant, and filter fabric run $40 to $85. Even if you rent a trencher for $86 to $132, you stay under $500 total. That is the shock. Most people can finish the trench in one Saturday morning. The wall sleeve and stack usually take another afternoon. On a 95-degree day with sticky air, this setup can deliver incoming air in the 58 to 64-degree range early, then keep indoor rooms 8 to 12 degrees cooler by late afternoon when you pair it with night flushing, shaded windows, and closed blinds. It is not fragile. It requires attention once a season. Check the salt. Wash the muslin, inspect the drain, clear the intake shade path. If you want more effect, add a second parallel 68-foot run and keep the same slope. If you want quieter flow, widen the intake box and slow the entry face. Do not cheap out. Schedule 40 PVC is not optional. Thin flex duct causes collapse, leaks, and mold. If you live on a tight lot, shorten the trench to 54 feet and run 2 parallel lines spaced 24 inches apart. If you rent the trencher for half a day, mark every utility first and keep every bend gentle. A hard, 90-degree bend steals airflow. A long sweep keeps the pull smooth. Seal every joint with exterior mastic, not cheap tape, because buried leaks turn good pipe into a wet mold tunnel. If your climate is very dry already, cut the salt charge in half and focus more on shade and nighttime purge. If your climate is sticky for weeks, keep a second tray ready so you can swap it in 40 minutes the first time it saturates. The principle stays the same. You are not trying to refrigerate the whole planet. You are trimming humidity, borrowing the earth, and giving hot air one obvious direction to leave. Your conventional system costs $7,400 to $14,800 to install. It costs $146 per month to run. It lasts 12 to 18 years before it ends up in a landfill. This costs $300 to $471 total. It lasts 20 to 25 years. Your choice. Everything I've covered across this channel, root cellars in August, spring houses for dairy, buried pipe cooling, I've put it all in one place. Step by step, season by season, room by room, in the order the families actually use it. Link is in the description. But stay here, because what Eli built is the part nobody is talking about yet. If you're the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe. Not for me, for what comes next. Because this is not a channel. This is a quiet movement of people who have decided they're done being sold what they already own. I want to hear from you. Drop your state, your July electric bill, and whether your grandparents ever used a spring house, cellar, or shaded porch trick in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers decide what we cover next. Next week, I'm going to show you what a 1946 Penn State document reveals about attic heat. The technique uses nothing but foil, lath, and an air gap. And the report from 1946 that proves university engineers knew about it decades before your contractor priced spray foam. You're not going to want to miss that one. And once you build it, summer stops sounding like an enemy. It becomes information. Sun angle, humidity, night wind, shade length. The house starts teaching you again, like farmhouses taught anyone willing to listen.